Hi everybody, Joe Malarkey here with a SecureCRC technology brief. Everybody's heard of HTTPS. That's that thing that you put in the browser that makes you safe when you're browsing online, right? Yeah, it is, and we're going to talk about how it works today. So HTTPS is the secure version of HTTP. And HTTP is the protocol or language that a browser uses when it talks to a web server. That's what gets you all the text and the pictures and the videos from those web pages. HTTP has been around for a while, so has HTTPS. And in the past, you may or may not have used HTTPS, but these days, almost every website uses HTTPS. In fact, you don't even have to type it in. If you go to any place like Facebook.com, it'll redirect you to the HTTPS version of that website. So HTTPS is the secure version of HTTP. What does that mean? Well, the security provides actually two different things. Number one, it provides an authentication. That means when we go to a place like Amazon.com, we know that it's Amazon.com's website and not some server in somebody's basement waiting for us to send us their credit card or send them our credit card. The second thing it does is it provides encryption for when we're sending that information back and forth. No one can listen in and capture it. So how is this done? Well, HTTPS works with another technology that most people have heard of called certificates. Every website that you go to with an HTTPS designation has a certificate on the website. And that certificate is actually what performs those two functions, the authentication function and the encryption function. Let's talk about the authentication function first. So, how does that certificate help us to authenticate that website? Well, if we had a way to know that certificate was legitimate, then that would solve our problem, right? That's what happens, but the question is, how does it happen? Well, what if the certificate was signed cryptographically by another entity that we all trusted implicitly? Yeah, that would work. In fact, that's how it does work. Certificates themselves are signed by higher level certificates called Certificate of Authority certificates. It's these Certificate of Authority certificates that we already trust. Why do we already trust them? Well, because the Certificate of Authority certificates actually come with our device or our operating system or our browser. For instance, in Windows 10, Microsoft ships most of the CA, the trusted CA certificate authorities on the internet, right with Windows. In fact, you can see it. If you click on the Start button and just type in the word certificates, you'll get to a tool that has a lot of folders in it. One of those folders will say root certificate authorities or words to that effect, and that has actually a list of all the root certificate authorities. There's some other folders in there because we can also have a certificate that was signed by a higher level that in turn was also signed by a higher level. But sooner or later we get up to a root that wasn't signed by anything, and we have to already trust those, and those are the real certificates that we actually need inside of Windows 10. Browsers also can come with a list of certificates. Not everybody uses Windows 10. Phones can come with certificates. Any device can. In fact, you can load CA certificates onto devices manually if you want to. For instance, if you have your own certificate authority in-house at a company. So that's what provides the authentication that the certificate came from a trusted third party. But there's other checks that get done as well when a certificate gets sent to you. And that's exactly what happens when you go to a website like Amazon.com. When I go to Amazon.com and I type in HTTPS Amazon.com, Amazon sends me their certificate. And the first thing that my computer does is it checks to make sure that it was signed by a CA that my computer trusts. But it does a few other things as well, two other specific things. Number one, it checks the validity period for the certificate. When certificates are issued, they only last a certain amount of time. Some certificates are issued for 3 months, some for 2 years. It depends on the CA as to how long that is. So my browser is also going to check that to make sure the certificate is still valid. It's not out of date. The third thing my browser will always check is whatever is written next to the HTTPS, that name, be it www.securecrc.com or just SecureCRC or Amazon.com, that name actually has to be written onto the certificate. If all three of those things are okay, then my browser lets me into the site. It doesn't give me a hassle. It used to let you into the site anyway without telling you that there was something wrong, or you might see some kind of indication up on the top. But these days, browsers actually stop you from going to a site. If you want to go to the site, you can, but you actually have to click on some kind of link on the browser telling it, yes, I understand the safety concerns. I want to go to that site anyway. Once you're on a site and it's valid, then you'll usually see a little lock on the browser. Depending on your browser, it'll look a little different, but they all pretty much show that little closed lock just to let you know that HTTPS is working correctly and the certificate is valid. Okay, the certificate's valid. Then what? Well, the second thing we want to happen with HTTPS is we want encryption to happen, especially when we're sending our passwords or credit card information to a website. We want to make sure that no one except for us and the website can get into that conversation and see what we're talking about. So how do certificates help with that? Well, let's back up a minute and talk about what we'd like to happen when we're trying to do encryption. What we'd like to happen is for both parties, me on my browser and the web server, let's say Amazon.com, to have an encryption key that encrypts and decrypts stuff. Now, there's two types of encryption keys that we usually use in networking. One is called a symmetric key, and the other is called asymmetric keys, or a key pair. We'll get to that in a second. Let's talk about the symmetric key. A symmetric key is a very fast key that encrypts and decrypts. So the same key can do both tasks. So if I have this one key, if I can get it to another party, we can both talk very quickly and very securely. The problem is, how do I get that key to another party over an untrusted medium like the internet? We can't put the cart before the horse. We need security. We need encryption to happen first before we can actually transfer that key. And that's an issue. Well, in come the certificates, because when certificates are issued, they're actually issued with the other kind of keys, these asymmetric keys, or an asymmetric key pair, because asymmetric means there's two keys. One key encrypts and the other one decrypts. You have to have both keys to do anything. So they can both encrypt and decrypt, but they can only encrypt stuff for the other one, and they can only decrypt stuff from the other one. So we need them both in a conversation. Now, in certificates, these are called private-public keys. There's a reason for that. The private key never leaves the server or whoever owns the certificate. They never let it get out. No one ever gets to see that, only that web server. The public key, we don't care who sees that. Good people, bad people, it doesn't matter because it's in the way that we use the certificate that keeps us safe. Now, here's how we use it when we're going to a site that uses HTTPS. Let's take Amazon.com, our first example. Once again, I go to Amazon.com, they send me their certificate, I validate the certificate. Then we start encryption. But how does that happen? Well, when Amazon sends me their certificate, they also send me their public key. Now I have their public key. What can I do with that? Well, if you remember what I just talked about, anything that one key encrypts in an asymmetric pair, you need the other to decrypt. If I encrypted something with the public key, the only entity in the world who could decrypt that would be the possessor of the private key, and that's the web server. So how can I use that to my advantage? Well, what if I invented one of those symmetric keys out of thin air? Remember those symmetric keys, the ones that I actually want to use? What if I just invented one of those and then took that key and encrypted it with the server's public key? Then sent that back to the server. Server's the only one that can decrypt it because they're the only possessor of the private key. Now they have a copy of that symmetric key that I just invented. These symmetric keys, by the way, are usually called session keys as well, because during a session, we end up using that key. And that's actually what we're about to do. So once I've encrypted my session key and sent it back to the server, now they have a copy of it. Now we can stop using the public and private key, and we can just use this very fast session key between us. Now that provides a couple of things. Number one, session keys are very fast, they're very secure, and they're temporary. We never use them again. We use it for this one conversation while we're talking to the server, and then when that conversation ends, we delete the key. That's called a dynamic key. We always invent a new one for every new session. See, the problem with keys is the more we use them, the more they become untrusted, because attackers can start deriving the key material out of messages if we use them too much. That's why we don't use the public-private key all that much. We use the public-private key for an actual key exchange of that symmetric key. So we're really not using those public-private keys to the point where someone might be able to derive the key material. But one other thing we can do to prevent that is we can use shorter lifespans for the certificates. And more these days, you'll see lifespans of only 3 months. It used to be 2 years to 5 years was the standard, but now the standard is being pushed down to 3 months. That's really being pushed by an organization and a website called Let's Encrypt. Let's Encrypt gives you free certificates. Everybody's using them now, and their certificates only last 3 months. That means you have to renew them every 3 months. Why would they do that? That sounds like a pain in the neck. Yes, that's why they're doing it. One of the big problems that we've seen in the last few years on the internet is companies forgetting to re-enroll their certificates, which would make a server not be able to do encryption. Well, you might still be able to talk to that server and get through that server. And that's actually how the Equifax debacle, where all those people's information got sent out, that's actually what happened. They let one of their servers, actually a lot of their servers, certificates lapse, and someone found a way in because of that. So Let's Encrypt, they only let their certificates last 3 months. And the thought process behind it is you're going to have to automate that process. And they provide you with some ways to do that. Automate the renewal. That's what we all should be doing. Don't try and remember to renew it, or set something on your calendar. Everybody forgets. But if they set it to 3 months and they won't give you a certificate for any longer than that, you have to renew it every 3 months. So you almost have to automate it. It's actually a really good idea, and their certificates are free. And that's why you see most companies on the internet taking a good look at Let's Encrypt. And when you go and see a certificate, if you click on that little lock and you view the certificate, more and more these days, you're actually seeing that Let's Encrypt signed that certificate. They are a CA on the internet, and they're now one of the trusted CAs on the internet for most devices, most browsers, and most operating systems. So, as a review, when we go to an HTTPS website, we get a certificate sent to us with a public key. Then our browser invents a session key, encrypts that with the public key, and sends that back to the server. Now they have the session key, and now we can just talk using that session key back and forth. When we're done with our conversation and we end the browser session, the key is destroyed, and the whole process starts again the next time we go to that website or any other website. So I hope this has been an instructional video for you. My name's Joe Malarkey with SecureCRC. I put a couple of links down in the notes, and once again, if you like the video, please subscribe.